Well, hello! Today I'll be looking at a camera from Hawkeye. But just before we get into this, a quick reminder to please like or dislike this video if you didn't like it. Comment down below, don't forget to subscribe, and normally at this point I would say, and please click on the little bell icon to make sure you get updates when I upload. I've since found out they've moved the bell. Thanks to Win for pointing this out. Sorry to all the people that went looking up in the corner and maybe are still there lost looking for a bell icon. It's now down here, apparently. Unless it's not on your system. Who knows? Anyway, I feel I'm off topic. What am I talking about? FPV cameras with HD recording functions. It all started back with the RunCam split, as far as sort of mini quads went. I didn't like the original much, and that really got me off RunCam's Christmas card list. Since then, of course, we've had multiple iterations of the RunCam split. We've had Caddx getting in with the Turtle, which was pretty good. Recently, I looked at the Caddx Tarsia, which had two lenses, one for recording, one for FPV, that solved that problem with normally the quite bad image you find in a live picture versus the very good image you find in recording. So there's a couple of these just come out lately. The one looking at today is called the Hawkeye Firefly, which they've called a 4K split camera. I'll be looking in the future as well as this one called the Foxeer Mix 2. That's a 1080p one, this is a 4K one. So we'll be checking this one out today, but the Foxeer will be coming out soon. Anyway, this is what you get. In this little box, some instructions, some stickers, cables to connect stuff, I don't know what that is, little bottom plate or something, another mounting plate thing, OSD board, and the camera system itself, which looks like this. Fairly chunky camera, this one. It's not small. It's got some weight to it. It's got a decent sized lens on it. Not sure what the field of view is, just from looking at that I will try and find out. And then it's got this board. This is a full size 30.5 square, so it fit on a normal stack. And they've done an interesting thing here. They seem to have scratched out whatever the chipset was there for whatever reason. But it's fairly normal stuff. We seem to have USB here, mini HDMI I think here, a couple of sockets here for putting stuff in, its own little beeper, and a couple of buttons. So I think the first thing to do is get it mounted into a quad and see how it works essentially. It's quite useful that it's a nice wide voltage. I think it runs from 7 to 25 volts. So we shouldn't have a problem just plugging it straight into the power, and then we'll take it from there. So first let's find a quad to run it with. So what we're looking at here is the quad it's hopefully going to go on. This is a FuriBee X215 Pro S. I reviewed it back in May 2008. You can see it's already half disassembled. The reason I wanted to use this one is it already had on it a little HD recording camera that works as an FPV camera, and the board for that. Now the description actually said this board acted as the VTX as well, but as far as I can see, I reckon the flight controller has the VTX on, because it's also got a little antenna coming out of it which attaches to this thing. So I'm going to take this apart a little bit more. I've already fought with it. I wanted to use this before, and basically these hex screws, they're as soft as cheese. I had to hacksaw little slots into them. I tried heating the things. I eventually got these out obviously, but good grief, that took an age. Anyway, let me break this down a bit more so I can show you what I'm going to do. Okay, so with the other bits removed, you can see that we've got the camera and the board here, and we're just connected by what looks like basically video, ground, and it says RAM pin, which could be anywhere from sort of 5 volts to whatever battery I put in, which will be 16, so that's fine. I should just be able to move that over, and you can see here that there's a little UFL connector just under the flight controller, so I think the flight controller is the thing with the integrated VTX. We will find that bit out. And what I've just done with the Hawkeye is I've removed the other pins. These were for there was 2 labelled trigger, there was one for a voltage input, so I've just got the right pins out there where I can just put those straight onto there, and that should hopefully work. Now, one thing I normally do with all my reviews, I make a point of not watching anybody else's, but I noticed Bruce from RC Model Reviews had a problem with his, where he said he had a failure, so I thought I'd just watch that to make sure I wasn't going to make the same thing. And he thinks that he had a short against the electrical contacts on the back of this microphone. He thought he might have got pushed against there and it had a problem. What I've actually got in mind, there is a little bit, and this is how it came, it looks like a little bit of epoxy or something, some sort of conformal coating, but it hasn't quite covered everything. There's a little bit where it has got
little bits of bare metal. So I'm just going to put a blob of hot glue over that to secure it. Then I can get this in place. The only thing I've got a slight worry about this is mounting. You'll see between these two cameras they're quite different in where the mounting holes is in terms of the size and the position. But I'm sure we'll figure something out. So I'm going to get that in place now. And I should say that the reason I wanted to use this one, apart from the fact I knew it would fit, is this one also flew nice and smoothly. And I thought, you know, we're off to a good start there. Because if this was flying smooth, then this one should be smooth as well. That's the theory. Okay, well this is now the board mounted on the quad. You can see obviously the camera's not mounted yet. And the quad's not back together. Had to make a little change. We originally had the first camera going here for the RAM pin. The RAM pin turned out to be 5 volts, and I soldered onto it. What would happen? I'd turn it on, I'd get a blue LED flashing, and I'd get this triple beep over and over again, which it wasn't explained anywhere in the manual. There's really not much to this, so I had to kind of work it out. And when I looked at the multimeter and it was 5 volts, I thought, it needs at least 7. So I found another pin here, which is basically the battery voltage, and that was absolutely fine. So what I'm going to go and do is power it on, and we can go through exactly what the options are in the OSD thing here, and see what we need to change and get it set up. I've got an SD card in there. One thing that comes with it is this little bit here, and the idea of this is I think it goes on either that way or underneath, and it's got this little lip on it, and the idea is it's supposed to sort of stop that SD card from coming out. I haven't really got the room to put that in any feasible way, so I'm not going to have that. I'm not expecting it to pop out. I might just, I can always just put a bit of tape over the two just to stop it. But anyway, let's turn on and see what happens with the OSD setup. Okay, so let's power on. Who stole my lens cap? I think my dog stole the lens cap from here. You can see we've got some bits and pieces on the screen. Now, what I thought, as normal with these things, is you press the enter button to go into the menu. When I press that, you will see we get a little recording indicator on the screen. So that is obviously not the way to do it. So what I found is we've got to go left in order to do stuff. And then we've got stuff like resolution. We're in 1080p 60. You can see all the others. Loop recording, WDR, we're going to set to on. Exposure, record audio. Presumably that's on, yeah. Date stamp, don't want that. Off. EIS. Time-lapse record we don't want, slow motion we don't want, metering average, sharpness normal, auto record. I'm going to set that to on so I don't have to think about turning it on and off. Codec I'm going to keep as 264, snapshot and recording no, fixed frame rate sounds good, electronic shutters auto, and that's about that. We've got some other setup things. We've got the date time I've already set, auto power off. Do I want auto power off? Hang on. Alright. Auto power off is off. Beep sound, you can hear it. It's obviously on at the moment. Language is English. Frequency 50 Hertz. TV mode I'm going to set to PAL. It actually said the latency was better if you used PAL.
The DVR in my fact chart goes a bit wonky if you change between PAL and NTSC whilst recording, so that's what that noise was about. But you can see I've now got extra lines to sort out. What I wanted to go in and do, and my main camera's just run out of battery, is get rid of its own OSD display off there. So to do that, you go back into the setup menu. You will eventually come down to two things I actually think are quite important. One is OSD and one is this thing called logo watermark. So we can turn both of them to off. So coming out of that, I do notice that the little voltage pops back in again. And it actually gets worse than that. I'll show you later.
Well, we're all installed and ready to go. One problem I had here, you can probably see this is where the VTX antenna used to fit using that little piece of carbon. That would go directly onto these sockets, so that wouldn't fit at all. So I've sort of moved that up there with zip ties. I've got a bit of hot glue over where the exposed bits of the microphone was. The rest is in place okay. The only problem I had during the setup, where the VTX is down under there, essentially at the bottom of the flight controller. On the bench, it overheated within about 2 minutes and shut down. Hopefully, with some airflow, that's not going to happen. This is quite a unique VTX. I don't know what it uses. I went into it expecting to see Smart Audio or Tramp, and it just said VTX. So there's, I don't know if it's some sort of bespoke version or something, but yeah, we're all in. The camera's looking quite nice. It's in there with a couple of little rubber washers to keep it reasonably nice and tight. We've got our SD card in there ready. It's set to auto record. Fingers are crossed, really. Let's go out and see if we can fly this, see what sort of footage we get.
So here we are ready to test. Conditions are pretty nice today. It's Sunday morning, a little bit of a breeze coming over, but it's really not much. I don't think you could ask for any less than this in a typical situation, really. So yeah, we're going to fly this around, mainly going to hope that the board doesn't overheat as it did on the bench there, but the little Hawkeye should go auto record, and yeah, we'll see what we can get from it. So up we go for the Maiden, and I'm starting off with the DVR footage because of course it's important to see what your FPV view is like out of this camera. And I have to say I'm a little bit disappointed because I thought this was going to be better than all the other sort of all-in-one camera HD boards. And you know, it's not bad, but it doesn't get much better than, you know, things like the Caddx Turtle and even the original RunCam Split to a large extent. It's noisy and the colours aren't very true. We've also got the additional problem that although I turned off the Firefly's OSD display, you'll notice it's come back on. We've got the 1080p stuff in the top left there. We've got the flight time down the bottom. We've got a Hawkeye and no volts. And I went and turned this off, but every time I power cycled, it would come back again. So that's a bit of a pain. And just to show what I mean by this FPV camera being a bit dodgy, I was flying at the same time the Nazgul 5, which I've got a review coming up for, which has installed by default my favourite camera at the moment, the Caddx Ratel, which is a whole different ballgame. But I just wanted to show the difference here because I had problems picking certain things out because of the FPV camera in the Firefly, which if you run a decent camera looks very, very different. The other thing I noticed flying this quad, and it's useful where I could have a look at the other one as well and compare, is the FPV footage seemed a little bit jerky, like it wasn't getting the normal frame rate. You don't really pick this up in the DVR because it's got a sort of set 30 frames per second rate, but flying it just seemed like it was sort of chugging along slightly. It wasn't like a lag thing, that seemed absolutely fine. It just seemed like it was slow to sort of update the picture as it was. But let's get to the HD footage because that's what we want to see. But again, I have to take you on another little journey because when I got this home and put it on my computer, which is an iMac that's 6 years old, it looked like this. It was all jerky, and I thought I must have it in the wrong mode. I have it doing like a frame every half a second or something. But no, I mean, it's not my Mac, I don't think. This plays 4K videos with ease. It does all the editing absolutely fine. Most of the time, it holds its own with Windows boxes, which are much more powerful and newer. I mention this for two reasons. One is I'm interested to know if anybody else had this issue. It might just be a Mac thing. It might be the type of codec I'm using. I'm using the H.264 here. Secondly, just to let you know that in order to edit it and work with this, I transcoded the video beforehand. This shouldn't make a difference because essentially what I'm doing is shortcutting what YouTube already does to it as soon as I upload it. But I just wanted to let you know I'm not dealing with the raw files as such here. They're slightly changed, but they should be, to all intents and purposes, identical. So the actual HD footage it records is pretty good, I think. I thought the focus was a little bit soft in the sort of foreground, maybe a little fuzzy, I'm not sure, but overall I think it looks, you know, quite doable. This splits up into 3-minute segments when it's recording by default, and it also records audio if you want it to. Audio is, as you expect, sort of kind of noisy. It sounds a bit like this. And let's just see what happens if we go through one of these 3-minute chunks. So we'll line up chunk 1 and chunk 2 next to each other and see if we can detect anything in between when we go. So we're just at the end of file 1 here and straight into file 2. Nope, as far as I can see, I can't see any dropped frames there. It looked perfectly fine. And here's a bit more flying. I've just put the DVR footage down the bottom right there just so you can see the comparison of the two. Again, I'm pretty happy with the footage that you get off the HD. I would say it's not perfectly without sort of a bit of wobble, but then again, neither is this quad. This quad was flying okay. It had a bit of a problem. I found out with the I think anyway. What we've got is a bit of a low motor idle for air mode. You may have seen it earlier on when I went into this roll and suddenly it went into crazy amounts of roll. It's not all the time. It looked like when I put sort of a vicious roll in without any throttle and then asked it to stop, it would just carry on spinning, but I could power back out of it. But I'll have to go back and sort that out. It just felt very docile compared to the Nazgul I was also flying with it. But looking at the footage, it seems fine. It's just a bit weird on the yaw and stuff because it's an earlier version. Anyway, as I was saying, this footage looks absolutely fine. One of the reasons I wanted to include the DVR stuff there was I had this bit where I was kind of trying to line up on the tree for a little gap there. And what happened is I went towards the tree and I looked at it and I couldn't see clearly enough to really be confident about going through the gap. So I had to sort of back off and come round again and look for a slightly different angle. Again, when I did this on the other quad I was flying, the Nazgul, that was no problem because the camera was better there. So again, it's a situation of compromises really. You're not gonna, this isn't like a normal FPV camera and here we are just approaching and having to bail. This is a compromise on the camera. Now if you're just out flying in a field, you know, doing your flips and rolls and whatever, not so much of a problem. It only becomes a problem if you're getting into proximity flying around or very close to trees and stuff, where you might hit the odd stray branch that you figured you'd be able to see but somehow couldn't because it disappeared on you. And it only seems fair to show you that mishap that I had because of that air mode problem or the idle problem. This is on my last battery. I flew 4 batteries on this quad and I was trying to get, you know, a little bit more aggressive in the flying because I wanted to see if there was any more sort of judder or anything in the camera as it went, and I wanted to see how the FPV as an FPV camera held up in terms of was there any lag and stuff. And as I said, the lag situation was absolutely fine. The problem was more for me the slight jerkiness in the DVR. Anyway, I decided to go for the tree gap and I thought, you know, I'd do a nice little roll through it and that would be quite good. And I hadn't figured, of course, on that digital idle being a problem. So off I went, going for the tree. I do my little roll, and it carries on rolling. I power back up, but I don't quite get out in time, and I come down. No damage to the quad. Camera's just a bit wet, and I just wiped it off, basically. So what I wanted to do after this flying is obviously go back and find if there was a firmware update to take care of that OSD being on the screen. But since that time, Bruce released another video saying he'd managed to brick his second Firefly unit, and he thinks it was the case of going into this 120 frames per second mode, and that seems to be borne out by a couple of comments on Facebook. So I thought what I'd do is I found my firmware that I wanted, and this is back. It was released on the 2nd of August. Then there's another fix that fixes camera hang, which was released on the 29th of August, and the latest firmware is from the 6th of September, so it's fairly up to date. So since that video Bruce released about bricking his camera, he's then released another one the next day, which shows how long it takes me to do these things. It takes weeks over various periods of time for me to put a review together. Bruce was able to update the firmware still, which suggests it is just that hang and not an actual bricking of the camera. But I wanted to go ahead and update this firmware anyway, so I thought I'll show you how to do this and we can run through the modes just to make sure everything's fixed and everything looks good. So let's do that next. Right, so I've put the firmware on the SD card just there, so I should just be a case of plugging this in and seeing what happens. Also, to try and keep it cooled down, I've just got the little leg here from my soldering station, which has got this little USB fan on. I just need to try and keep the main board a little bit air cooled if I can whilst we're doing this. Okay, let's plug in. So I can see around the other side we've basically got a flashing light, and we've got 3 beeps there, and it has now rebooted. So I guess the question is, we should check to see if it's going to brick if we change the mode. So just be the mode button. Wait for 2 seconds. 4K 30, 2.7K 60, 120p 120, hasn't frozen, back to 1080p 60, so that's good news. I suppose the other question is, can I get rid of my OSD now? So let's check that bit out next. OSD mode off, watermark off. Okay, so that seems to have got rid of the OSD, so what I'm going to do is power it off, power it back on again. See if it comes back. Yeah, that looks good. We've got no OSD, and we've got the recording indicator, meaning the auto record's working fine. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. Hooray for firmware updates. And this little fan seems to stop it overheating as well. Okay, well, firmware all updated, it looks okay. It fixed the problem I had, it fixed the problem with the freezing, so that's quite good. It would be nice if that firmware was a little bit easier to find. It took me a while to track it down. A sort of direct link in the manual or the box or something like that would be really nice. Sort of something to say, check latest firmware, we may have updated something or fixed something, or, you know, that sort of thing. But at least it's fixed. So thoughts about this camera? Well, the actual footage you get out of it is pretty nice. I've just been using the 1080p stuff because that's what I do. It will obviously do 4K. It probably looks fine, but I don't render in 4K. The file sizes are too big. I can't be doing with it. But if you want to do 4K at 30 frames per second, no doubt this is going to be pretty good. What I don't like about this camera, and it's the same as all these sort of split camera types, is why the FPV footage is so awful. Let's have a quick trip down memory lane. If you've been doing FPV a while, you would have probably had one of these. This is a GoPro Hero 2, and I used to fly it in its actual case like this. What I'd done is actually drilled a hole in the case so I could take a live out cable from my GoPro into what was then my OSD and my VTX to get footage from it. Now, this was in 2012. That is 7 years ago. Have a look at this footage. You will notice that it's free of noise. It seems absolutely fine. That there were some limitations in the GoPro sensor. For example, the CMOS sensor meant if you did point into the sunlight, then it would darken out at the bottom, but that's just a CMOS camera thing. The actual noise you're getting there is almost non-existent. And one could argue, you know, this is not intended for FPV, so what are you expecting? So if you have a look there, that's my Bixler 2. I've got in there, since 2013, got a camera called the Horizon HD3, which is a little board with a screen on it, believe it or not, and a little ribbon cable that comes out of the camera. The camera is mounted on a little pan tilt thing. Again, this is a camera that records in HD and supplies the FPV image, and here's some footage from 2013. Again, you'll notice the FPV feed is completely clean, absolutely no problems at all. So I don't know what it is. Perhaps it's the fact that they're now squeezing down onto a single board and they have to put a lot of components tightly together. I'm not an electronics expert. I am a consumer who demands as good as it can get. So come on guys, do better. I just want it to be nice and clean. So this might get nice HD footage, but right now I'd still be much preferring the Tarsier because it's got that FPV camera as well as the HD lens, and that seems a lot nicer, a lot cleaner, a lot better picture. But you know, it's fine. If you went out and flew 10 packs on this, you'd pretty much convince yourself by pack 4 that this is all fine and you can see what you're doing. It's only if you mix it up and fly with another quad which has a decent camera in it, and then you go back to this one and you're like, ugh, what's going on? I can't be dealing with this. Now, I would go and fly even more lipos through this and see what it could do and check the other modes out and stuff, but I've got this Foxeer Mix 2 which I'm now going to put in place of this one. We'll see if it does any better. We can but hope for a decent live FPV image. You know, at least the recording is not bad. So what do you guys think of the FPV footage? Is it doable? Would you be happy to fly with that based on the fact that the HD footage is okay? It's a question of, do you live with the compromise here, or do you have a decent FPV camera and something like a GoPro on top? Anyway, this has been the Hawkeye Firefly split 4K camera, kindly supplied by Banggood. Thanks to Banggood. And of course you'll find links down below where you can check this out in more detail. I will of course be coming back and checking out the next camera in the long list of HD cameras on the board, and we'll see what happens with that one. Anyway, I hope that's been helpful, and I'll catch you in the next video. Bye for now. Well, you've made it to the end of the video, so thanks once again for watching. If you like what you saw, then please consider subscribing, and if you really like what you saw, then be sure to check out the link to my blog for a variety of ways in which you can help support this channel.